For months, Jake Foster kept holding on to something that no longer fit the shape of his life. Not because it was still right, but because releasing it felt too painful. But one quiet evening, with the room softened by the last golden light and a blank notebook page waiting in front of him, he began to understand something important. Letting go is not always losing. Sometimes it is the first gentle act of peace after a long season of carrying what should have already been set down. Jake Foster had a habit of staying emotionally attached long after things had changed. Not only to people, though that was part of it. Also to old plans, old versions of himself, old hopes that no longer felt alive, but still occupied too much space in his heart. He was loyal in a way that often made it difficult to tell the difference between devotion and fear. Because sometimes what we call holding on is really reluctance to face the emptiness that comes after. Lately, there was one thing in particular he could not seem to release. It had once meant a lot to him. Maybe it still did. But what remained now was no longer living in the present. It was living mostly in memory, imagination, and the tired ache of repetition. Still, he held on. He replayed it, revisited it, measured the current day against what used to be. And each time he felt the same quiet heaviness settle back over him. He was not moving forward. He was carrying something in circles. That evening, the light in his room was especially soft. Golden hour rested across the desk and turned the notebook page pale honey. The stillness in the room felt almost like permission. Jake Foster sat down and wrote, "What am I still holding on to?" The answer came to him immediately, even if he did not write the details fully. A version of how I thought things would be. A hope that keeps asking the past to return. An attachment that no longer brings peace. A story I keep reopening. A feeling that is costing me too much energy. He stopped and looked at the page. There was sadness in those lines, but also relief. For a long time, the thing he was carrying had remained vague and emotionally tangled. Naming it made it more honest, and honesty often makes pain easier to hold. He turned the page. Why is it so hard to let go? Because I think letting go means it didn't matter. Because I'm afraid of the emptiness after. Because I don't know who I am without this story. Because pain has become familiar. Because part of me is still negotiating with what already ended. That last sentence felt especially true. How often do we keep revisiting something, not because it is still alive, but because we have not emotionally accepted its ending? We bargain with memory. We replay old versions. We keep asking reality to reverse itself quietly. But reality does not return through longing alone. And carrying what has already ended can become its own kind of suffering. Jake Foster sat with that for a long time. Then he wrote a new heading, "What if letting go is an act of peace?" He began slowly. Maybe I can release this without denying its importance. Maybe I do not need to keep bleeding to prove I cared. Maybe peace is not betrayal. Maybe this story can be honored without being carried every day. Maybe letting go means I am ready to live here again. That final line made his throat tighten slightly. I am ready to live here again. Because that was what holding on had been quietly stealing, his presence. He was physically in his room, in his current life, in this gentle evening full of warm light. But emotionally, he was often elsewhere, in what used to be, in what should have happened, in what might still somehow change if he kept enough attachment alive. He looked around the room and suddenly felt the cost of that. The desk, the lamp, the quiet air, the simple evening waiting to be lived. How much had he missed by remaining half-turned towards something already gone? So he wrote 3 lines. I can grieve without clinging. I can remember without reopening. I can choose peace without erasing love. Those sentences sat on the page like something clean and true. He did not experience a dramatic release in that instant. Letting go is rarely that theatrical. But something inside him loosened. Not the end of sadness, just the end of fighting the truth. Over the next days, he practiced small acts of release. He stopped revisiting certain old messages. He stopped mentally replaying the same scene before sleep. He sat with the emptiness that followed and discovered that emptiness was not as frightening as he imagined. It was quiet, tender, spacious. And in that space, new things became possible. Not immediately, but genuinely. A little more peace in the body, a little more presence in the room, a little more room in the heart for what still belongs to this life. Weeks later, he looked back and realized that letting go had not removed something precious. It had removed the constant friction of resisting reality. And once that friction eased, the whole atmosphere of his days began to change. Letting go is not always losing. Sometimes it is setting down what your heart has carried past its season. Sometimes it is making peace with the fact that something mattered and still cannot come with you. Sometimes it is honoring a story without living inside it forever. You do not need to erase memory. You do not need to become cold. You do not need to pretend it never mattered. Sometimes all letting go asks is this: a quiet room, an honest page, and the courage to stop asking the past to keep your heart occupied. Because peace often enters where clinging finally softens. And maybe that softness is not the end of love. Maybe it is the beginning of freedom. If this touched you, comment, "I choose peace over clinging." Subscribe for more warm, reflective life stories about healing, boundaries, and letting the heart breathe.